Ah, hell, every man, we got to get this back on. We've got people
See the
waiting for
light
this
switch?
podcast. I don't see it. Try
What's
this.
this chain to? Oh, nope, that's the zipper to my pants.
Yeah, that won't work. How about this? We'll, yeah, this thing. Shit.
Uh-oh.
That can't be good.
It's a real simple principle. It means that your difference, your height, your stature, your age, your religious affiliation, your gender, however you identify as a person, will not be a roadblock to buying a ticket. We're not going to filter you out because you're different. We're not going to filter you out because of your skin color. We're not going to favor somebody because of their skin color. And that really hits home to 2020 and what happened last year. And that was a big awakening for a lot of us. You know, we made mistakes. We had a big miss last year, and we did not jump on Black Lives Matter as quickly as I felt we should have, because we felt afraid of saying something. For me as a cis white male, I made the mistake of feeling it wasn't my place, that this is something that the Black members of the community should do. And a Black member of the community made it very, very clear to me. They have a burden going back centuries, and this is not their responsibility. Change won't happen with just them pushing this. We have to be their allies, and we're not their allies by being silent. We're their allies by making very strong statements that we believe, enforcing policies that we believe in to make sure that this racism isn't tolerated, that racists aren't tolerated. Radical inclusion doesn't mean you get to show up to the event if you're telling everybody that you're a white supremacist Nazi. We will not let you in. We will take a fucking stand against you. I will not permit you. I'm one half of the LLC. Racists are not permitted at Mosaic Experiment. If we find out that you are, that means you're oppressive. And that means that you are oppressing others, and that's not radically inclusive. Your attitude and your ideology should be open to differences. And you can't say, I'm a Nazi, I'm a white supremacist, but I am open to being at an event with Blacks and Hispanics and Asians. No, you're not. You are ideologically against them. You want to oppress them. We don't want you here. And if that scares you away and that makes you not want to come to regional burns anymore, stay the fuck away from Burning Man. We don't want you. Burning Man agrees with this. They don't want you. You are the reason anything declines. You are the reason society is declining. You are the reason the social contract is breaking apart. We are the reason it's coming back together. We will fix this. We will stand next to all of our brothers and sisters, all of them, and we will fight for them. And we will take a stand against you. We don't accept you. We don't want you. We never wanted you. Oh, some of these regional events used to tolerate you, and they used to look the other way, and they used to try to be all embracing and all loving. You are not all embracing. You are not all loving. We have no room for hate. There's enough hate. We're fed up with hate. We're no longer going to accept hateful people, hateful actions, people that are inspiring violence in others. There's enough violence in this world. We need more hugs. And I firmly believe in what John Halcyon said. More people in this world, most of them, would rather hug you than hurt you. And the mainstream media commodifies hate, commodifies negativity. That's what sells. That's what advertisers love. That's what gets clicks. But in reality, you come to this event, you are going to find what you want out of humanity. We will do all that we can to ensure that. This community will do all it can to ensure this, to keep the fucking Nazis out, to keep the hateful white supremacists out, to keep the racists out. This is the only way that we can change. Burning Man is one of the most white events I've ever been to, and that needs to change. And one of the reasons it hasn't is because there hasn't been a strong stance being taken against these white supremacists. You are not welcome. Radical inclusion doesn't mean we're letting you in. We will never let you in. You will be on our ban list. We barely ever do that, and we barely ever have white supremacists in our community. When we find out who you are, you will be escorted out. We will call the police and have you escorted out, and you can have a record if you'd like. That's how strongly we feel about it.
Hello, and welcome to Out of the Mud, the new video podcast of the Mosaic Experiment for 2022. I'm your host, Corvus, and joining me is my co-host, Everyman, whom you just saw in our opening segment there. Now, if you missed the digital event in 2021, that's going to be something that you probably haven't seen before. While the experiment was taking place, Everyman and I were live streaming throughout the duration, and that was something that we really felt necessary to highlight as we begin this, our first episode.
A lot of those live streams we were doing were promo updates and informing the community of things that were happening during the digital burn that we had in Mosaic Experiment 2021. Some of those were in longish form. And this was a piece that came out of one of those that followed an interview with Kathy Slafter, our consent team lead, with John Halcyon from Burning Man. A rather philosophical, emotionally charged interview. And we just saw that and went into one of those promo segments live. And that's what this came from. And it wasn't just relevant to Mosaic Experiment 2021. We decided to isolate that piece because unless you were watching all of our live streams from start to finish, you would not have seen it. We're isolating this one piece because it's not just relevant to 2021, it's relevant to all of our burns. It's something that we stand by, and it's something we will always stand behind.
And this is one of the reasons why we're here today, bringing you this podcast. We feel that as an organization, it's part of our civic responsibility to take stances on important issues, like what being radically inclusive means. Additionally, we wanted the opportunity to connect with you in the community on a more regular basis, to hear your stories, highlight your theme camps and art, and raise awareness for your efforts, not just within the burn community, but in your daily lives as well.
And that started happening when we started doing the live streaming, Corvus. We started getting some morgue members as guests, and we started finding out things that they were doing outside the burn that were really interesting activist things that we didn't know about, and the community was introduced to them in that way. So we started thinking this is a good thing that we should be highlighting more on the regular, kind of a mix of giving you information, informing you of the calendar updates. So all the what, when, where, how, all of that stuff that we would normally be putting into a text message and an email that we send out, we'll highlight those things first. Interesting things that are happening, dates that are coming up, other regional events that are happening. We'd like to announce those too. No reason to leave out other burns. But we'd also like to highlight community members. If you go to Mosaic and maybe you've gone to Mosaic, you have a story about the first time that you came. Maybe we're the first burn that you've ever gone to, and maybe you came to the event unprepared and you got over that somehow, or maybe somebody helped you get over it. We'd love to hear that story.
Definitely. So if you'd like to submit your story, art, or any ideas for issues that you'd like for us to talk about, go ahead and click the link in the description and email us at promotions@mosaicexperiment.com, and we'll be in touch with you about that. Another thing we'd like to mention is that we've got some openings on the morgue for several positions this year, including leads for placement, art grants and ticketing, co-leads and rangers, DPW and the web. And we're also looking for a scribe to help keep track of our organizational meetings. Now, Everyman, you mentioned that we're going to be giving some updates to the community on the event this year, and we've got two that we can share right now. As it stands, following our winter retreat a couple weeks ago over Zoom, a summary of which can be seen here, Mosaic Experiment 2022 will be taking place in person at Reclaim from September 29th to October 2nd.
Get it on your calendars right now. Ask for those days off. We've got a feeling this one's really happening this year in person.
And in terms of the theme for this year, we were really disappointed that we weren't able to bring you Mosaic in person last year. So we're carrying on the theme rather than on and off again. We're going off and on again.
It really makes sense, folks, because there were effigy submissions for that theme. There was a lot of excitement around that theme. People were building theme camp ideas around it, interactive art ideas around it. And there was all kinds of spontaneity and energy right before we had to cancel the event. And it just seems criminal to let that go away and to just come up with yet another theme again. I would like to see those ideas revisited. I'd like to see those ideas better fleshed out and built upon. So the theme for last year is going to be the theme for this year. Sort of, kind of.
We're just switching things around, off and on again. I think that's what we originally had. And then we switched it to on and off again when we had to go digital. And now we're off and on again. Eventually, if we keep flipping the switch, it's going to happen.
How's that go with Willy Wonka? Strike that, reverse it.
Yes, exactly.
Corvus, I'm really looking forward to seeing what people come up with. In the last couple of years, we haven't been able to have this event in person. And there are all these art projects and theme camps that people are thinking of. And then the pandemic happened. And I think a lot of these folks have just been adding to these. And they're just really antsy to finally unleash this at an in-person event.
Get as creative, get as wild, get as expressive as your heart desires. Share that with us.
If you're watching this and you've never been to Mosaic and this is resonating with you and this is getting your creative juices flowing and this is getting you to want to come out, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait to see your ideas. Do it. Bring some friends. Talk to them about this.
Joining us is our very first guest on Out of the Mud. We've got our very own Tonic here, who is our new lead for consent education for Mosaic Experiment's consent team. Thank you very much for being on the show, Tonic. We're very excited to have you here.
Oh, I thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Tell me, Tonic, the consent education team is new this year, and I know a lot of the Mosaic community is unfamiliar with it. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what the consent education team is to give people a better idea of how we're expanding the consent team this year?
Yeah. So we, we had the consent team last time we had a live event. It was the only time. It was the first time we had the consent team, and there was kind of two elements. There's the side of the consent team that deals with consent incidents and helping people process that, helping, work through, more of a restorative justice model, helping people understand why somebody may have felt hurt, understand what happened, try and heal things if they can, all that whole process. And then there was also the, having the workshop where we did consent 101. We had some reaching out to try to also teach people what consent was, indoctrinate people a little bit into the consent culture and help them figure that out, working with the greeters and that kind of stuff. And they just realized that was kind of too big of a job for one lead to kind of take charge of that, and they needed somebody to be more in charge of that side of it and less involved with the actual emotional healing work of that. And so that is why I'm now the co-lead for the consent team, but my specific role is to be the education person, to kind of lead those workshops, post things on social media, reach out ahead of time, help more on the educating side of it, as opposed to now we've had a consent incident and now we have to go into the action side of it.
Yeah. How did the role come about, and what made you decide to take the helm on that?
Well, I already a little bit on the fringe of the consent team, just by virtue of, camping with the Bloody Bar and being close with Slafter, who was the person that started the whole consent team and kind of got the ball rolling. And, they were looking for people to kind of come on board, be involved. And I was immediately much, much more interested in the education side of it than the helping people process their emotions side of it, because emotions are gross, really. Like, who wants to deal with those?
I understand that.
And I used to be a teacher, so the education part of it
okay.
came pretty comfortable to me. I'm used to speaking with big groups of people and telling them what to do a little bit. I could be bossy if I need to be. So it seemed like a natural fit. I was also, as somebody, just on a personal note, once I started hanging out with people who were into consent culture, I guess, for a better word, it was kind of a revelation for me. It was really kind of a big step in helping me on my journey, to feel more comfortable with people, to feel more comfortable with saying no, to all of these things that I kind of struggled with my whole life and kind of thought, well, this is just the way society is. And then having some people coming along and being like, actually, no, you don't have to be that way. You can actually be somebody who is really easy to say no to. And you can be somebody who feels comfortable saying yes, because you also feel comfortable saying no. And that's kind of where I got excited. I'm much more interested in kind of spreading the word and being the missionary, so to speak.
How did you get involved in Mosaic in the first place? Was that your introduction to the Burning Man Regional Network, or have you been to
It was, yeah.
Okay.
So my husband Rambles had always talked about wanting to go to Burning Man. And I was like most of the United States. I knew that Burning Man was this rave thing that happened in the desert in Nevada. And I was just like, I don't like electric music, and I'm not that into drugs. Like, I do not see the appeal. That was what I thought it was. I was just like, loud music.
That's how the media
in the desert.
reports it.
Yeah, like I don't want to go be in sand just for this. I don't go to raves in my own city. Why would I go to the middle of the desert and possibly die to go to a rave? That was what I thought, Burning Man was. I thought that's what I thought, it was. And once I had some friends, Swoon and Flux. What is Tom's burner name? I'm not good with burn names, by the way, guys. I am terrible.
Likewise.
No. Angie's Tom. So Swoon's Tom. So good friends with Swoon locally, and she was very enthusiastic. She and her husband went to, Scorched Nuts. They went to Mosaic, and she's like, no, seriously, I really think you would enjoy this. Like, you guys really got to go. Like, she really brought us on. And so we went, and I had no idea what I was walking into, like really zero concept. And I got greeted by somebody who like gave me a hug and handed us some flutes and like, I don't know, probably blew bubbles or something. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is cool. All right. And then once I realized the community side of it, the art side of it, I left a convert, as did Rambles. It was like, you guys, you don't understand. They're like building a utopia in the hills of Ohio for like a weekend. It's like a weekend utopia, and you just get to go live there for the weekend. It's amazing. It's like Brigadoon, it's this perfect world, like springs up out of nowhere, and you get to be there for a while, and then it goes away again. But you get to keep building it every year. You get to keep coming back, and I was hooked. I love that. I love the art. I love the community.
Different vibe from Burning Man proper.
Yeah, the 10 principles. Totally agree with all of them. It was great.
Talking about the 10 principles, consent is known as our 11th principle, but ultimately it should be the foundation of everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
How does consent tie in with some of the other 10 principles?
Well, I think that, at its heart, consent is about radical self-expression. It is about authenticity. It's about immediacy. Like, it's a lot about just believing somebody when they say what they want or they don't want. It's about feeling comfortable to say what you want or you don't want, and knowing that that's going to be accepted, that the person you're talking to is not going to try and talk you out of it or round you up and everything. And it's not really just, everyone thinks consent is about sex, and that is where it gets used the most. It's where it gets talked about the most, because I think that's the area where, when you're not being more careful around consent, people can get hurt much more badly. But it changed the way I think about, I work in the alcohol industry, and I see all the times when I'm out, at work or out at bars, one person saying like, oh, I don't want to drink. And people pile on and start being like, what do you mean you don't drink? Come on, like, have a drink. Like,
I've experienced that myself.
Yeah, it's really changed. It's gone from something where I go like, that's an annoying thing that people do, to going like, that's fucked up. Like, you shouldn't do that. That's just wrong. This person said they don't want to drink, just leave it at that. Like, and there's so many parts of our society where that comes in, where you say, I have a preference about this, or I have a belief about this, and somebody immediately tries to talk you out of it, or tries to say, no, you don't really believe that, or you don't really feel that, or you're going to change your mind. That happens so much. And I think just being believed of who you are, being trusted that, you know who you are, and you know what you want, and you know what you're saying, it really changes almost how you feel about yourself also.
Yeah, it seems like, that being said, how it can expand beyond involving sex into all other aspects of our lives. It seems like consent ultimately is an act of social justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Slafter's very positive about this, and I know that they're going to come on the podcast later and talk more about that side of it probably. But yeah, it's we want people to feel comfortable at our events. We want to, we have talked a lot about why are we such a white community? Like, why do we attract only this one type of demographic? And then you have things where, if you've got somebody coming saying like, I've had this, like, somebody said something racist to me that's really hurt me this way, and people try to talk them out of it immediately. They start saying like, oh, you didn't really, like, no, they didn't mean it like that way, or no, like, no, like, don't take it
like
that way.
Or like a microaggression.
Yeah, like the microaggressions, the things. And yeah, so just like, I want somebody to believe me when I say, yes, I want to go do this physical act with you, or no, I'm not interested in that right now. I also, want other people to be believed when they say, I, was made uncomfortable by this interaction, and this is how it made me feel. We need to believe people when they say, this is my experience, and this is what it made me feel like.
I find that fascinating when we're talking about these different ways of looking at consent violations, because the default is to think about, you think about it in a sexual context.
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly how people think about it. And that's something that I've noticed, people would run away from this years ago. They didn't want to talk about it. On Facebook, they were afraid to discuss it. They were shaming people for discussing consent because they thought it was going to somehow give the wrong idea that this event has a problem. We have to talk about consent all the time because consent violations always happen at Burning Man events. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think of it differently when you talk about consent often, especially in your role now with consent education.
Well, when I first started hanging out with like polyamorous people and burners, and would, I remember the first time I was at an event and somebody was sort of like, hey, yeah, do you want to go get a drink later? Do you want to go get something? And I just kind of froze, and I was just like, I don't know. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't know what to say. And I was just like, maybe, I don't know. They said, it sounds like that's not a yes. That sounds like you're sure. So like, have a good night. Like, well, I'll catch you again later. And they walked away. And I was just like, mind was blown. Right. And I immediately felt so much more safe in that community. And it was not something that had ever happened to me like in my life. I'm 43 years old. So I'm a little bit on, the later side of the Me Too movement and this talk about consent. Like, I grew up and had my formative years when this was not something that was discussed. And I think everybody knows that those kinds of weird, icky interactions that leave you feeling like, I didn't really want to do that, but I didn't really feel like I could say no. And it wasn't, it wasn't the like rape where you like pull somebody in the alleyway with a knife was the only definition of rape that we all agreed on, and we were just left this weird thing that nobody knew how to talk about. Nobody knew how to approach. And like once you start getting into that community, like maybe from the outside, if you've never been there, you might hear like, oh, there's some talking about consent. Like, did they have some kind of a lawsuit? But that is
Exactly.
so much not the case. That is so much. Once you've been in it, you realize this is the safest place that I feel to be much more open, much more sexual than I would be in the real world, because I know that this is a community that is going to have my back, that's going to, work with me. And if something weird happens, I love that there is a process that can be talked about, where I'm not like going to be shunning somebody for life or making, we can talk about things before it gets to that level, So I think that it makes it a much, much safer community because we have this. And I think the more people that see that and who are familiar with what consent means, they're going to understand that that's what that means. When we're talking about it all the time, it means that we really take this seriously, not that it means that, there's a problem.
One of the things that I really enjoy about, the consent team, how that's been taken up, not just by Mosaic, but some of the other burns as well, is that the community really embraces it as well. At my first burn, the very last day I was there, I ended up in a camp with another person who I guess this was their first burn as well. And they clearly made a consent violation. They were using a squirt gun on somebody and the person said no. And then they ended up, making a sexual reference with a squirt gun and were ultimately kicked out of the camp. And when this was happening, someone heard, that camp yelling at them to get out. They're violating consent. Person's leaving very confused, but another burner comes up and starts explaining consent to the person, and not how it's restrictive upon somebody's radical self-expression, but it's freeing, being that, you're on the same page with people all the time. It allows you to open up, be free, be able to express without the worry of impinging on another person that's, trying to have their own good time.
I think that's a great example. Yeah.
It's reminding me now of the quote. The quote was, "You are entitled to your radical self-expression until it impinges upon my direct experience." I heard someone say this at the Global Leadership Conference for Burning Man years and years ago, and I never forgot that. And that was before these consent conversations were even coming up. I just remember that quote and remembering how powerful that was. And it was in reference to music, but that person did say you could apply that to just about anything.
The other thing that occurs to me, especially when, Corvus, you're talking about that example of like the person, like pulled the guy aside and explained like, this is what this means. And this is actually gives you more freedom, is that I think this is also helping with inclusivity from the neurodivergent point of view, where some people have a much harder time. And I kind of count myself as one of those people. I have a much harder time understanding more subtle social cues. I'm definitely not on the spectrum, but I'm just in my own head enough to be clueless, I guess. I am such a fan of direct conversation and from having things said explicitly to me and knowing where the other person is, and anything that makes that more comfortable for everyone makes, all types of people more comfortable, not just, around sexual topics, again, like you said, but around just, I want to know that something that's funny to me, if I'm pissing somebody off, I want to know that I'm pissing them off so that I can, apologize and move on and, and stop.
You're kind of going back to like your role with the consent education. What kind of things do you have planned with the consent education aspects?
Well, we are definitely going to continue doing the consent 101 workshop, and Slafter also did a kind of consent 2.0 kind of workshop at the Hoosier burn, the kind of like mini unofficial thing in Michigan, that went over really well. And that was where they talked a lot more about, how this plays into the wider society and not just the basics of like, what is consent and why you need to, ask somebody before you hug them. And it focuses probably a little bit more on the sexual connotations of it. So bringing it into a little bit more of the wider world and how it works with different, power dynamics and that kind of thing. I think that I would like to be doing a little bit more, ahead of the burns, is, maybe finding some good stuff to post in the Facebook groups and the Discords and where we're all hanging out. I've been doing a little bit more writing in my personal life. I think that could be a fun outlet for me personally that I could bring into as a gift to the consent team also, to kind of maybe write some articles and explain things, from that point of view as well. But
Nice.
the workshops when we're at the burn are definitely going to continue. And one of the things we said with the greeters was to have, ask people before you hug them. Greeters love to hug. Like, I love being a greeter. It's my favorite volunteer shift. I love hugging people, but not everyone loves that. And, right from the beginning, somebody asking you whether you want to hug or not, I think is a good way to set the tone.
Yeah. Now, do you think, like, with the pandemic, with COVID-19, do you think that's going to put a heavier load on the consent team and dealing with, what people are comfortable with in terms of interactions?
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be people who got a lot less comfortable with physical contact and touching and stuff throughout the pandemic. And there's probably people who have gotten a lot of pent up energy that they're just like going to be really excited to get out there and need to also, like, we're going to have to what is it? We're all going a little feral a little bit. We're going to have to re-socialize.
I have one last question. When you've gone to your first burn, could you describe the effigy experience to you? Like, how did that affect you?
Oh,
everyone has different experiences with that. I've heard some people say, effigy is nothing. I'd rather just stay at, I was having great times at theme camps and I don't know what the effigy was all about. Like, why didn't we just stay at our theme camps?
So when my first effigy, what it reminded me, what it made me feel like it made me feel sort of that pre-agricultural, like the tribes, disparate tribes coming together for a big festival of some kind, like, maybe it's the solstice, it's the time of year where you kind of come together, and it just felt like this kind of primal release. I understand, I felt like a very strong connection to like my early human ancestors and like what it must have felt to be kind of a little bit in the wilderness and like coming together out of the dark to just kind of like run around some fire and scream and just kind of let loose. It really made sense. Like this, I understand why we did this and why we still need to do it.
Agreed. That's the usual, that's the usual take that was pushed upon me, and at Burning Man proper, after going to a few of those, I started saying, what's the big deal going over? It's really, really crowded. And as soon as it starts going down, people get too close and the heat builds up so much, they start running away. And then you lose the group that you came to see the burn with, because like there's a crowd that just takes everything over as they all start raging and running.
Yeah.
But at a regional event, you don't have that rush. You do have a much more intimate vibe. It is a magical experience.
That being said, what are you most looking forward to with this year's Mosaic Experiment?
I'm definitely looking forward to having more of a leadership role and getting to know people a little bit more because of that. I've kind of been a little bit more in the background at most of the burns I've been to. So I'm excited to be visible in a way that would make people feel more comfortable coming up and talking to me and saying hi and getting to know more people. I'm really excited to see what kind of art comes out of the last 2 years. Yeah.
Thank you for coming here and joining us on this podcast. It's our very first. But this is also a really important way to start things off. We did like the idea of starting off with a consent conversation to get things going. But this is feeling like, here's hoping. Here's hoping. But this
Oh,
is
yeah.
feeling like a year that we're really going to happen. It's in the air. I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, no jinx, knock on all the wood you got, but
Yeah.
I feel it too, and it's needed.
So that's all the time we have for this episode of Out of the Mud, and I hope you enjoyed it.
We're going to do a lot more of these this year. We're really excited about it. If you've got any ideas for what we can talk about here, or any topic suggestions, or if you want to be a guest, let us know. Send us an email at, promotions@mosaicexperiment.com.
That's it.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next month out of the mud. Cheers, everybody.